just a little bit about my background while that's happening. I started life as a designer, and we designed complicated buildings, hospitals, military, schools, specialist laboratories, very wide experience. And when I started work, we would design it, we would then go to site through construction, we would work with the contractor to commission it, and we would then say to the client, here you are. Most of our clients weren't really interested in any of the technology. They just wanted a building. If there's a shopping centre, it must open on the 1st of November because Christmas is coming up. And you have failed. I remember I was on a Quanga, one of these government committees, and we were looking at the way some buildings are good, some are bad. There was one shopping centre in Ealing which we rated as appalling. The design was bad, the construction was bad, the commissioning was bad, but it opened on the 1st of November and all the shops, all the stores had the best year ever. It was a successful project. That coloured me. I then, as things developed, realised that very few designers had any understanding of construction and operation. We didn't, and when I ask here, particularly if I'm with young engineers, I say, how many of you visited site? Visited site? I'm a designer, for goodness sake. They don't go to site. Wow. Then I realised that that was the problem. So I took a group out of we have 350 staff as designers. I took a group out in project management and that type of thing. But latterly, I then became an expert witness where I was looking at why buildings have failed. Usually people, not the technology, the people screw up. Sorry, in Greek, that's they mess up. And I then arbitrated, sitting as the judge. So a lot of what I'm saying now is on that. And then I've been looking at a lot of other things. And here we are. I looked at chaos theory, complexity theory, and quantum, and I realised that there were lessons for us that we completely ignore. And with government present, when I was learning about this, there was the Greek financial crisis. Chaos theory actually applied, and I'll talk about it later, and you dropped to 0.84. We in Britain are heading towards 0.84 because we're not applying what I'm talking about. But do bear in mind, I'm getting old now. I wish I could apply what I'm talking about now when I was 40 years younger, because I would change my approach to design completely. I would not design buildings with over-dramatic algorithms and this and that. I make it simple, such as commissioning time. We usually start at the beginning of the project and the designer says, we will commission it in 2 months at the end of the project if the building is clean. The building is not clean. So we then say to the client, oh, you know, it really takes 2 years to commission an HVAC system. We didn't tell him that 2 years earlier, but we tell him that now. So that means that we don't get it commissioned unless it is absolutely simple, your design is standard, there's nothing peculiar about it, you can commission it quickly. If, however, you say, ooh, the newest technology, I can put on all these lovely control systems, bypasses, the latest fridge machines with bearings about that thick. All these changes are happening. If I apply them, and if I put that into the commissioning, what actually happens is the lawyers are called in about 2 years. Most of the time, I think the lawyers are only called in for 2 or 3% of those buildings. Usually the client fixes it. and I know there are one or two in the audience, I hope will argue with, please say to me, Richard, you really are so out of date. Yours is a nonsense. Now this is a hotel. We were at an ASHRAE conference, and you can see the wonders of the fan coil unit. The air comes in here. There's a drain pan with a lot of dirt on the drain bit. The filter, fortunately, someone had actually put a couple of slots in it to let a bit of air into it. It was then carried over. The access panel to the coil maybe hadn't been looked at for a little while. Interesting reaction by the ASHRAE members. Why on earth was that lock not locked? How on earth did a man like Rooley get into that? That shouldn't be allowed. We are designing systems like this. In my hotel, I'm going to show you a few slides of the hotel I'm in here. I can't see how to get into the fan coils. If someone can tell me, please do. But it's a beautiful room. The lighting, the ceiling. Anyway, we'll get on to that in a minute. This is my room, right? Now, this is gorgeous, you see. You have the thermostat. Now, remember, you're not numerate, you don't understand technology, and you walk in and you say, what do I switch on this thing? There are instructions here, but that's all about what can go wrong. It doesn't actually tell you what to do. Now, one of the great things up here, this says do not disturb. This says clean my room. When I left this morning, I forgot to press that. But it doesn't matter, because the people, the operatives, don't know that the light on the outside means please clean my room. Now, we are designers of services. It is us that design systems like this. Why do we do it? Now, this, believe it or not, is the light switches. Now, how many of you who are staying in this hotel where that's the light switch have gone through the whole cycle of pressing buttons, saying, look, I've got a lovely light under the bed and above the bed. Now, does that come on with the end button or the first button? You then have the full lighting. You then have little things you pull down at the side of the light to give you a lovely bit of light onto your bed. But we're all using computers now, and there are only Southern European plugs. Most travellers have American plugs in their bags. We don't have a desk. We have a little table, but we don't have a desk. This to me, this is us. We are the ones who do everything in the building that moves. Now, around about 1970s, in Liverpool, there was a waste paper basket under the lift controls. Someone dropped a cigarette into that box. It went on fire, it melted the controls, the fire went into the lift, and the lift went up and down the building with the doors opening and shutting. Because, now it says in the hotel, no smoking. Can you guarantee that no one will be smoking? Is this something to do with us? I think it is. Because we are the people who design everything that's dynamic in a building. Now, count to 15. Oh boy. Anyway, now I love this. I've asked a number of people. There are these fire extinguishers with a plastic tie on them. I've asked one or two people to look at it, please, and tell me if that tie means you can't actually press the button on it. I don't know. But as you go out, I don't know how that operates. But as consulting designers, we have actually trained occupants of buildings on how to use fire extinguishers. It's important that we pass our knowledge on. So that's that problem. Now, this is a classic, and I know I'm going off into architecture, but it's typical of a problem. I've actually been looking at what happens to people with dementia who are partially sighted. And I looked at this. Now, where is the tread? The edge of the tread. You're going downstairs and you feel for the tread. Is it there? Or is it there? Where is it? And you're partially sighted going down. It's actually, believe it or not, there. So there's black, there's brown, then black, then black, then brown. Anyone who's partially sighted will fall. And it's made slightly worse by not having a handrail. There's a handrail the other side, which is blocked off by notices. That's just as I'm really going up from that into what we design. Think how it is going to be used. This is there. Now tell me, these lights, this room is beautifully designed. It's designed to impress. It's got the air conditioning around here, which seems to be working pretty well. It's got these light fittings. Now, above the stairs, what happens? Please, someone tell me. I've asked about a dozen people so far. How do you, if one of those goes out, how do you change it in the lobby? Do you get the scaffolding out and pay €400 to have it repaired or not? Do we look at how we're going to maintain our lights? I'm then going to be told, well, those lights never fail. Don't expect them to fail, so you're all right, you're safe. The designer will say, no, these are long life bulbs, they'll never fail. Right, Greece never had building sites like this. I'm so pleased that your building sites are clean, well organised. You don't have a jumble of pipes, you're using this sort of thing, which is neat and tidy. Now, what is the purpose of a building? We tend to think, the architect tends to think that it's to do with the wind and water tight, looking good, or it must massage. The architect and the engineer's egos were massaged by this room, it's gorgeous. Or is the purpose of a hotel to be profitable? There was a comment yesterday that the condition must not vary, but in a hotel, it's room usage. That terrible thing I showed you in Las Vegas, the problem to the hotel was in an overbooked hotel, what happens if you take that out of action? So our designs must be so simple, so accessible, so standard, every fan call the same, that you can guarantee that our services will ensure 100% bed occupancy. It'll be something else that will have gone wrong. And that includes, went to one hotel, I was sitting down doing what one does in the toilet, and the grill beside me, some water came in. The designer had put the drainage discharge from the toilets above into this void. So it came down as loose liquid. And it had been like that for 10 years. No one was interested, of course, so I stood in reception and said, there's a risk of Legionella. Suddenly English was spoken and something was done about it. But they should have taken 6 rooms out of use. But they didn't, because that would cost them a lot of money. So the room that they moved us out of was let the next night. It is our job, in whatever we do, to guarantee that rooms are fully occupied. Springboard for research, provide profit for all of us. Of course, I'm going to talk about profit now. When we say, let's get the commissioning engineer to fix it, well, this is our jungle. Somewhere up here we get a brief. You then have what's jokingly called the design team, who work as a team, they cooperate, they work together, they arrive together at the same point, and you then have the construction people working away happily, and you then get to handover. At that point, everyone up here gets paid. So they want out of that building as fast as they can. The operator assumes that he'll be handed a disc with all the important information. All the valves will be labelled. All the duct routes will be given, and particularly all the spare ways on the switchgear will be labelled. They're assuming that. Dream on. Now, this is one which I've only just thought of over the last year or so. You're probably all familiar with S-curves, which is the S-curve of how you spend your money and time. Sorry, first of all, how you spend your time in your company, be it a designer, a manufacturer, a contractor, commissioning engineer. How you spend your time. There is also an S-curve of how you make your profit. Now, most companies in the building industry try to make maximum profit at the front end. So they front end load their fee proposals. I've done it myself for many years because I wanted to guarantee that I got enough money. But then of course you run out of money as you get towards the handover stages. Up here you've spent all your fee, but there's something happening. The bosses of your company are saying, hang on a minute, we spent all our money, you mean you've got to go back to site? Surely you don't have to go back to site. Should we? Shouldn't we? If you go into recession, you're into redundancy. Anyway, this sort of, the way things are loaded is important. And remember also that the profitability, we have a terrible industry. You see, here we have, we'll go to one beyond, we have a terrible industry. Because we have all these designers, we have all these manufacturers, all bidding, not being nominated. You then have this jungle of construction. You then have parallel working. It all works perfectly, doesn't it? But each one of those parties takes profit at a different time. Each one will decide how to make profit. If it means that the architect will get the engineer to do something for him, he will. He will make more profit. A lovely case of my daughter was working on a major project in London. It was a refurbishment of the Opera House. She designed the auditorium air conditioning. She was then on site as the designer right the way through. There were battlegrounds. Everyone was fighting hard. They then took the team away up into the Welsh mountains for a team building session. They had a ball. They loved it. Monday morning, back in the office, fighting. Because each company had its own position. So when we go into a design team, construction team, it doesn't happen in data centres because the project manager carries the total professional indemnity for all the designers. But remember that each one of these designers have their own professional indemnity. And I loved your talk on commissioning and testing, talking about design. If a commissioning engineer suggests a change in design, who carries the professional indemnity? Speaking to a judge in our High Court, he says the biggest problem he has is differentiating professional indemnity among the warring parties. Because it's when it goes wrong, everyone's at war with one another. Did I miss one? Yeah, now I'm on to chaos theory. There are two elements of chaos theory that I'm going to talk about. One is one of fractals, where from high level everyone looks the same. We must be careful, because when we look at architects, we think they are all the same. Some are extrovert, some are introvert, some are detailed thinkers, some are broad brush. So get to know your architect if you're a designer, and know whether the architect on the other side of the table actually understands detail or is looking at concept. Get the feel, know the people, understand that from high up, you see, everyone looks exactly the same. From high up, CRC and ASHRAE look exactly the same, but they don't. Each chapter looks the same, but they don't. So that's fractals. But I'm now going on to divergence, which is the the important bit, which is, I was talking about this. Now, bifurcations, and this is where this applies to governments. We're going through this precise thing where you start going along heavily, you go along steadily, you see, like that, and then something goes wrong and it goes off course. Unless there's an equal and opposite force pulling it back, you drop to there, and to there, and to, that's what happened to the Greek finance, and is happening it to Britain at the moment. We're way down here, rattling around, wondering where to go. We've fallen down because we didn't have the attractors. Now, a bit of detail on the attractors. When we educate one another, or when we are educated, we have these silos, and we're all brought together, and we graduate, you see. We know we've all been educated, and we all have this is wonderful, we've now got our degree, we've now got our professional engineer, we're on top of the world, off we go. But then you have problems emerge, you see, and each of these red ones is something goes wrong. If you haven't designed out how to deal with it, it goes down. So the designer and the contractor, the client isn't generally interested, he's only interested in money. So generally, we have to be prepared for any of have the green lines in place. Now, it gets worse. I'm sorry, it does get very much worse. Because here, we have this wonderful BIM, which has come to us, and it needn't be BIM, it could be the way we get to tender together, the structure, the mechanical, the windows, the shape, the standards, the plant, the light floor, they all come together, and you go to tender. You forget that the week before you went to tender, you were running around like scalded wotsits, trying to work out how you could adapt to tender, because you promised the client you would. You then have the model, and suddenly you arrive on site. And you arrive on site, and you've got setting out errors, equipment changes, acceleration. There's an import delay that affects us, has been affecting us in Britain in the past. It's now affecting us a heck of a lot more. It's even started now. Because if things are being brought in from Italy, where a lot of refrigeration plant is manufactured, do we know it's going to get there on time? Program slip, catch-up consequences, change orders. Change orders. Anyone ever had a job without a change order? No? Oh, gee. The workforce does not understand. It's interesting because we assume we know all about buildings when we're designers or contractors, the person actually fitting it may not understand how it's working. How do you communicate to them? Quality of work rejected. The clerk of works, though, we don't have so many. A clerk of works was the guy on site who monitored progress, monitored quality. We've had a dramatic fall in the number of clerk of works in Britain. It's coming back after the big tower block fire recently, but desperately short. The institution of clerks of works has dropped by about 80% in membership. We don't have them. So, you're going all down along here, and with luck, you can revise the BIM, you can redraw for construction, you can redesign, change. You've got to be ready for it. You've got to say, it's going to happen, therefore, I'm ready to do it. And I've got enough money in my bank account to do it. Now, silly little question. How much of the design is done by the modeller, the controls designer, supplier, the contract commissioning, fixed by operator? Comment in the talk yesterday by Rooley, I said to him, does the model, what happens when the model doesn't actually apply if you look at it 5 years later? And he was very clear, and I think we should burn those words into our hearts. we do a model of a building as at a point, which is at the point of doing the model. Not even of finishing the design, of doing the model. I then said, what happens after that? And he said, we can, in our models, build in divergences. So, I'm just thinking you're a designer, or a design contractor, and mathematical modeler says, your model says we will hit our sustainability targets. Whoopee! You then say, wait a minute, we know that the building will probably have a number of change orders. We know it will be a slipping program. We know there'll be, as we now know, bankruptcies will occur in contractors. We know that's all going to happen. Do we build in a 5%, 10%, 20% differential, or a 1%? 1% dream on. Because most of the studies that have been done on comparing a model with 5 years down the track are out, in one case, by hundreds of %. We've got to somehow or other marry all this electronic stuff with all our old design stuff so that we can somehow get together. The data center people do it, but they spend a lot more on their projects than we do. And they supervise and they build in a lot of redundancy. Now, all right, that's the sort of battleground we have on site. You just assume that everything is competing. Does sustain, if you have to hold in an operating theatre absolute cleanliness, if you're doing an operation on brain or bones, you must guarantee 0 sepsis. If you do it in the stomach, I'd be happy to have my stomach surgery in here. It doesn't matter. You're more likely to give off bugs and take them in. But there are some things which have to be absolutely right. Is that more important than sustainability? I asked my data centre friends, how important is energy? Oh, sod that. Well, they don't actually say that. They say we take due regard of sustainability, we apply all the standards that are available to us, we do our calculations, and we do a balance between da-da-da-da. That's what we do. Why do we do it? Why can't we get it right? Value engineering, this is the same sort of thing, isn't it? Go from concept to client, punish one another, sit at a site meeting, and you're the designer, or you're the contractor, or the client. You have to make sure that the other people around the table can't go on the back of your mistake that you made to hide their mistakes. Has there ever been in site meetings like that, where you've had to fight your corner, where your people have done things slightly wrong? Probably doesn't happen now. Probably sites run so smoothly that there's no difficulties. That column is not put up a few meters out of space, or sorry, a few centimeters out of space. And the important one here is who eats who. I've got to make a profit. Anyway, this is all the sorts of things we think we can do, but do we? Just really summarise now. Divergences, corrections, divergences, corrections. Whenever we do a thing, we should think of how it could go wrong. We heard a talk at ASHRAE last year by the guy who put a module on Mars. And the rule in his team of 100 was that if anyone came with any ideas of how to do something, they had to also come in with the reason it would not work. We don't do that in our industry, do we? We jump to our conclusions. Actually, we talked about, he gave an example of they were going to use a powered parachute, the 4 corners which would lower it down. They actually used it. And the person who came up with the idea had to explain why it would not work. Then they could discuss it. We don't do that you may do it in your offices. I'm so pleased you do. I'm so pleased that you don't look as contractors and subcontractors for holes in the specification which you can use to make profit of by change orders later. Most of my arbitrations have been around this area. where someone has tried to exploit. They look at the design as it comes into the contractor's office, and they say, now wait a minute, that design's weak there. I'll be able to get a change order out of that, and on a change order I will make more profit than I will in my bid. So it doesn't happen in Greece, I know. Just back on this, must get ourselves back on course. Each thing we do, try to get back on course. These are grey areas. Just an awful lot of them that we'll bandy them about. We've heard a lot about commissioning and testing. That will solve everything. It won't solve bad design. Now, these are challenges to BIM. Institute of Civil Engineers in Britain did a big seminar 4 weeks ago on, this is in civil work, they find that 74% of BIM projects have to be redesigned. I've found 2 or 3 contractors who use the BIM drawings, but BIM drawings are not showing you how it will be built. It's showing how it will be coordinated such that you can go to tender. Someone please destroy my argument. This is a silly little example, plant room. Everyone got it right, except the structural engineer was a bit late and he was a few meters, well not a few, sorry, a few centimetres out. So the green is what the structure wanted, the other is what the BIM model showed. This happens time and time again. Who polices it? Is someone penalised for it? Just to finish, Maslow and Herzberg. Anyone ever heard of Maslow? This is a triangle where we start, this is for the human being. You start with the psychological needs at the bottom, then safety, security, then social, then you come into esteem. Chapters in ASHRAE give esteem to one another. Very important. You then come to self-actualization, and then there is a level above that where you're at oneness. Herzberg says, no. That's beautifully theoretical. Let's analyse it a bit more. And this is what Tesco use in training their staff. I'll simplify it. There are 2 Herzberg columns. One is what satisfies you and motivates you, and one are the hygiene factors which make you feel safe. Everything we do, it doesn't really make people more productive. It doesn't really make them better at their jobs. Comfort and productivity. I've done work on this. I've even given television interviews on it, on how good we are. Aren't we great? We can give a productive environment. Can we heck? We can make an environment which will make someone in the workforce feel comfortable. They will be happy to work, and they will not talk about the environment. That's all we do. We make it safe for them. Then the bosses and the community can work with them and lift them up. I used to do what I call this a one-day sick building audit. I'd go into a building, I'd walk through the building, a colleague would walk through the plant rooms, I would find out what was wrong with the building in terms of comfort and productivity, and he would look at the plant. One particular building, 10 stories, each one was a tax office. In 9 of the tax offices, the boss sat in the corner office and did the exciting, complicated tax matters. On one floor, the boss stood in the middle and knew everything that was happening. He knew things about all of his workforce. He motivated them. In the other offices, we did actually a big study on how people moved around. And the person most spoken to on every one of those floors was the guy who did the photocopying, because everyone had to go to where he was. So he knew more. So when I go into a building, I always find out who's the one everyone complains to. But this is a prime example. We have to provide good enough conditions to enable a commercial organisation to work. Therefore, If I was starting my life again, I would design systems that can be commissioned easily. I would not have thermostats like that. I would have normal, a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler. I would have simple to commission systems. I would not have complex bypasses, control systems. I'd simplify it right down to the way I know will work. I'm dreaming. I'm too old. I wouldn't be allowed to do that because we want to be lifted and be technically wonderful. So, where do we go? This just last two slides. What do we blame? The ranking of importance. The owner ranks design errors and design omissions relatively high. The architects and contractors and engineers rate them low. Coordination issues, not very important, but as an arbitrator, believe you me, they are very important. Then, at the bottom, we all think the owner screwed up, but in fact, they don't think they do at all. How can we communicate in that way? That's it, we go from the design, so we blame the M&E. Now, I have to put this up, because this is our Prime Minister. You know in Britain, there have been a few battles, haven't there? It's not only that he's fighting with a bull, I don't know whether Europe's the bull or Parliament's the bull, but what's very interesting, this guy is actually the police officer, and the bull's pushed it out the way, and we get on with it. Let's keep out of court, let's keep thinking simple, let's not fight more than we have to. Thank you.